So on this Monday night, when I've been here for the last, I think since the new year, I've been trying to delve a little bit deeper into the core teachings of the Buddha. The first teachings, the turning of the wheel, which are the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And so we, over the last few months, have gone through, while I've been here, I've covered the first noble truth, that there is suffering and difficulty and stress and confusion, and it's a given in life. It's unavoidable. Everybody's having a hard time. If you're having some difficulties in your life, welcome to being a human being. And that there's a cause for some of the suffering, some of the unnecessary stress, and that is this sort of addictive craving, self-centered attachment. And that there is liberation, nirvana, the third noble truth, that, this is like the big carrot that says you can get free in this lifetime. Through this eightfold path, through meditation, through discipline and renunciation, you can change your relationship so drastically to your mind, to the causes of suffering that arise in the mind and body of us human beings, that you can be happy. Like, that's amazing. It's like, really? I can actually be happy? And that's what the third noble truth, the promise is, nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering. Not freedom from pain, not freedom from pain in the ass parents or children or partners, but freedom from suffering about the pain in the asses in your life. Suffering from hating them. Freedom from that extra layer of unnecessary suffering. And then we had to take 2 weeks on the first factor of the Eightfold Path, because I didn't get very far. The first factor is wise understanding, right understanding, and the Buddha goes into detail about karma and the truth of karma as a law of existence, and not a philosophy, but what's really happening here is that everything matters. Everything's important. Nobody gets away with nothing, never. That's the simple version. Fully responsible for all of our volitional actions. And it's connected to tonight's topic, the second factor of the Eightfold Path, the next, which is because all of our karma is going to dictate our happiness, our unhappiness, our liberation, our suffering, how we relate to our karma, how we create our... Karma literally means action, your acts. But there's the understanding that with acts come a reciprocal effect, cause and effect, response. And so tonight, after the Buddha explains the importance of understanding this world and the importance of understanding that hatred is going to just lead to more hatred, and ignorance is going to lead to just more ignorance, and that we have to realign our understanding and come to wise intentions and wise thoughts, and training the mind to think and to intend. The second factor is translated by different people differently. The Pali word, the ancient Buddhist language, is Samma Sankappa, and often it's translated as thought. Sometimes it's translated as intentions. I like intentions a little bit better, but it makes some sense to actually put them together and say wise, intentional thoughts. Because there's a very, very important distinction between intentional and unintentional thoughts. Intentional and unintentional actions. or using the word volitional and or non-volitional. Perhaps you saw tonight as you were meditating and you were observing your mind, that your mind does not obey you. Did you get that? You tell your mind to shut up a couple times and your mind said, kind of laughs at you and says, you think you're in charge? You think you can just stop me? It becomes painfully clear that the mind has a mind of its own, and that it's inner anarchy in there. You're not actually in charge of your mind completely. It's occurred to me more and more of the connection with mindfulness of the breath, and you can see that as you breathe, that the body breathes all by itself, that it's an involuntary muscle, the lungs. They just breathe all by themselves. You can have some influence over whether you breathe deeply or you breathe shallowly. You can influence the breath, but you're not really in control of it all of the time. And there's the experiment of, well, you can hold your breath until your body passes out. If you really think you're in control, right? Try to stop breathing. It's like trying to stop thinking is a little bit like trying to stop breathing. You can stop breathing until you pass out, and then the body will keep breathing without your permission. And the mind is a little bit like that. As it turns out, the mind is sort of a involuntary muscle that just thinks all by itself. You can sit here when you get grounded and get some skill at mindfulness, and you can just watch these thoughts arising out of nowhere and then dissolving into nothing. And it's really clear, it'll become more and more clear, if it isn't already, how these are thoughts without a thinker. You're not actually thinking these thoughts. These are non-volitional thoughts that are just the programming of the mind, old habit, energy of the mind. Not your fault. But your responsibility, our responsibility, is how we relate to what arises in the mind. And beginning to see the difference between what thoughts am I volitionally and intentionally thinking. How am I using my mind? Am I stuck in negative thinking a lot? Am I intentionally getting hooked into hatred and judgment and resentment? How much of the time am I using my mind to hate? To be a full-time hater? Living on Hate Street. That joke works better in San Francisco. How much of the time, and watching your mind, it's amazing to see how much of the time the thoughts that even seem kind of innocent are actually craving, are actually lusting, are actually planning for some future happiness, some pleasure that's going to make me happy in the future. Next time I'm here's topic will be action and intentional action. But right now, just talking about the thoughts. But with action, it's quite interesting to do an experiment of like just don't move at all, and then see what your intention is behind the next movement. Even right now. Don't blink. How quickly we become uncomfortable. And like me, like I just noticed, like I was smiling, I was like, I don't like this. And my self-consciousness and this intention to like get out of, I was uncomfortable. and I moved my facial features because I was craving for something more comfortable, for pleasure. Even that low-level lust for comfort, craving for freedom from this discomfort. In order to walk this path, this eightfold path that will lead to our liberation and our freedom, the second factor, one of the keys to our liberation is going to be training the mind. Is training the mind to think wise thoughts and to avoid unwise thoughts. Now again, intentional. To intentionally cultivate wise, appropriate, liberating patterns in the mind. It's really interesting to me that the Buddha actually understood neuroscience 2,500 years ago. He actually understood neuroplasticity, and that even an adult can create new neural pathways in their mind. And he used the analogy, he said the mind, he said sometimes it's like a stone. And if you can repeatedly drop water in one place in that stone, it'll eventually cause a groove in that stone. And if that droplets are greed and hatred and delusion, you're going to get a whole bunch of greed, hatred, and delusion pathways in your mind. And you're going to think greedy, hateful, and delusional thoughts your whole life. And the setup actually is that we're born with a propensity, based on our survival instinct, towards craving and attachment, towards aversion and hatred, towards self-centered delusion. And so we're already kind of, the chips are already stacked against us, because the mind already has these sort of bad habits from birth. Not even your fault, like you're just fucked from the beginning. And then you come to spiritual practice with a mind that has a whole bunch of bad habits towards self-centeredness, towards anger, towards fear, towards... And the path offers us a way to create new thought patterns. To start training the mind. You know, also, we all have some kindness, some natural, but even before you start meditating, hopefully you see there's some kindness in there, and some compassion, and some good habits of mind. It's not all hell in your mind, I hope. So the Buddha keeps, I said earlier, I said I have a short talk. This is like, as far as the teachings in the Eightfold Path, this is the shortest one. It's like a page and a half in this translation. The right understanding that I did last time was like 10 pages. This is like a page. This is all the Buddha said about right thought or wise thought. He said, thoughts that are free from lust, thoughts that are free from ill will, and thoughts that are free from cruelty. That's it. Period. Free from ill will, free from cruelty, free from lust. And lust there's a continuum from lust to greed to any kind of really clinging or self-centered craving. It's not just sexual lust. He's not just talking about sense pleasure lust. It can be lust for money. It can be lust for material things. It can be lust for attention. I like the fact that he goes on to, he uses some analogies when he talks about the refinement of the mind and training the mind to think right thought, wise thought, thoughts that's free from lust, ill will, and cruelty. He said, here's a simile for the refinement of the mind, for the training of the mind. There are, my friends, gross impurities in gold, such as earth and sand, gravel and grit. Now, the skilled goldsmith first pours the gold into a trough and washes and rinses and cleans it thoroughly. When the goldsmith has done this, then there remain moderate impurities in the gold, such as fine grit and coarse sand. Then the goldsmith rinses and cleans it again. When the goldsmith has done this, there still remain minute impurities in the gold, such as fine sand and dust. And now the goldsmith repeats the washing, and thereafter only gold dust remains. The goldsmith now pours the gold into the melting pot and melts it together. But the goldsmith does not yet take it out from the vessel, as the dross has not yet been entirely removed, and the gold is not quite pliant, workable, and bright. It is still brittle. It does not yet lend itself to molding. But a time comes when the goldsmith repeats the melting so that the flaws are entirely removed. The gold is now quite pliant, workable, and bright. It lends itself easily to molding. Whatever ornament the goldsmith now wishes to make of it, be it crowns, earrings, a necklace, gold chain, the gold can now be used for that purpose. Similarly, in the case of a practitioner devoted to practice, meditation, there may be such gross impurities and unskillful conduct in deeds, words, and thoughts. Such conduct, the follower of the way, the Eightfold Path is the way, the follower of the way puts away, lets go of, and relinquishes. When one has abandoned these, there may still remain such impurities of a moderate degree of lustful, angry, and violent thoughts. So this is really important. He's saying even in renunciation, even though you're following the 5 precepts perfectly in action, no longer killing, no longer stealing, no longer lying, no longer acting unskillful with your sexuality or indulging in intoxicants, even with purity of conduct, you have relinquished, you have put aside the gross impurities of your life, but still remain such impurities of a moderate degree of lustful, angry, and violent thoughts. Such thoughts the follower of the way gives up, puts away, lets go of, and relinquishes. When one has abandoned these, there may still remain such subtle impurities as clinging to relatives, to nation, or to one's reputation. Now, I got to back up a little bit and say, gives up, puts away, lets go of, relinquishes. Sometimes it can sound, the traditional teachings can sound a little too much like, oh yeah, I'll just stop thinking those thoughts. 40 years of a bad habit of, self-hatred, but I'll just never think that again. 40 years of anger and judgment, but I'll just stop. I'll relinquish those kind of thoughts. Not that easy. Those thoughts, that neuropathway is deep groove. The habitual reactive tendency of the mind, even after 25 years of my own meditation practice, I'll be watching my mind and I can't believe what it says sometimes. Sometimes in meditation, I like to just pretend like I have dementia. It helps me not take it so personally. Like, I can't believe my mind is still this insulting. this angry, this afraid, this self-centered. With meditation, we have some success in changing our relationship to the mind, but it doesn't get rid of it completely. So sometimes it sounds a little, oh, just set it aside, relinquish those kind of thoughts. Not that easy. Much more hope around a radical change in how we relate to the mind, and not pretending like, well, if I just meditate long enough, my mind will stop that shit. I'm not even convinced that the Buddha's mind stopped that shit. As you know, many of you know, I'm like to talk about the Buddha's relationship with Mara. Mara being this sort of difficult character in the Buddha's life. It's an analogy for his own mind, for greed, hatred, delusion, and how it kept coming back even after his enlightenment. But that his perfection wasn't that it never arose again, but that he related wisely to it. He said, I see you, Mara. I see the greed, I see the fear, I see the old mind habit patterns coming, and I relate to them. I don't pretend like they're not here. I like that saying, even when we've made some practice, because this is a big one for us householders. Subtle impurities, such as clinging to relatives or to nation. You know, I'm an American, goddammit. Or maybe more like it, like I'm a West Sider, goddammit. My nation. Or you see that in sports fans, right? I don't know how many sports fans there are in here, but like people suffer about their identification with a team, not even their nation or their families. Or it always shocks me when spiritual people are like suffering about the fucking playoffs. Really? You're going to allow yourself to suffer about identification with whether those billionaires are winning or not winning? That really, really? No judgment. Clinging to relatives, to nation, or to one's own reputation. That's huge. Am I going to suffer about what you say about me, what you think about me? Connecting to praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and ill repute or disrepute. Understanding that I had a early teacher who said, I was complaining about people talking shit about me, and he said, you know what people say about you is none of your fucking business. If it comes back to you third hand about he said, she said, just remind yourself, it's none of my business. It wasn't said directly to me. Don't worry about your reputation. Worry about your conduct. Worry about your actions. Worry about how you're showing up, not the praise and blame game. Disengage from it. Not that it's possible to, but at least internally in the mind, don't put so much stock into reputation. And hopefully, if you're wise and you're skillful, you will have a decent reputation. At least amongst the people who matter. The Buddha talks about being blameless in the eyes of the wise. That's who you want to have a good reputation for. The people who are kind, who are compassionate, who are wise. The mind is a merciless critic. And it loves to, they said that I don't follow the neuroscience stuff that much, but I remember reading something about when they're looking at the mind, that the part of the human mind that accepts praise is almost like a Teflon-like surface. Like praise doesn't really stick to the human mind all that well. But blame is like Velcro. And there's just a part of our mind, our reputation, we take it, we hold on to it, we identify with it. The Buddha saw that, knew that, said, don't suffer about your reputation. He says, even when this attachment to your relatives... Now, let me back up a little bit. Remain subtle impurities of clinging to relatives. Now, this is big because I think most of us think we're supposed to cling to our children, to our partner, wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend. You think you're supposed to cling? On some level, and there's a semantic here, which is what we're, from the Buddhist perspective, what we're supposed to do, the healthy thing, is connection, not clinging. And several people actually said their intention was connection. And that there's a difference in Buddhism between clinging to relatives or friends or anybody, which is this, it's holding on, it's attachment. And that the ideal for your relatives, in this case, your lovers, your loved ones, is non-attached connection. Clinging, non-attachment. Not detachment. Detachment means I am separate from you. Detachment means I'm separate from you. Non-attachment means I'm connected to you. I'm feeling you. I'm touching you. I'm embracing what's happening for you and for me, knowing that we're impermanent processes unfolding together. Non-attachment, non-clinging to our relatives is the state of liberation. You don't have to cling. Clinging always hurts. Because we're changing, because we're impermanent. And when somebody tries to make us not change, not be impermanent, it's either a stifling, a suppressing, or it's a sort of holding on kind of, I like to talk about the rope burns that clinging always creates. Was there a clarification? Yeah.
Clinging and missing. We use the word missing.
Yeah.
And issue.
Yeah.
And I think it has different meanings for different people. And I love how you relate that to say it's all in our head.
It depends on the intensity of the missing and the context of I think our own internal relationship to missing. I think it's a little bit like desire and craving with missing. Because desire type of missing, healthy, natural, I want to be with you. I wish you were here. I'm okay. I miss you. I'm not suffering a lot about it, but I do. There is some missing, right? Different from the craving kind of, I miss you so much that I'm unhappy. I can't be happy without you here. I'm really suffering. I miss you so much that I'm miserable. Craving. I don't know if you've heard me before, but I make that distinction between desire is I want. Craving is I can't be happy until I have. So what kind of missing, right? Is it the kind of missing of like, I want... I was this week out of town, first time away from my newborn son, and I have a daughter and a son. It was my first time spending almost a week out of town last week. And there was some missing, for sure, some desire. I wish he was here, and I miss him. I wasn't suffering a lot. It wasn't like, I was in New York City. I was having a good fucking time. I was missing my family. There was desire to be connected to them. And I probably crossed the line into some suffering at times, but not a lot. Mostly it was just the sort of consequence of love and that connection and feeling it when it's not easily physically accessed, right? And so it wasn't the kind of suffering of clinging, although sometimes missing is, and sometimes it's just, oh, I'm kind of disconnected and I prefer connection, right? I prefer being closer to. I hope that helps. It can be either. Sometimes missing is really suffering. And I've been there. I've been in places where, and we all have, where you're missing so much that you're just miserable. And sometimes it's I miss, but I'm okay. I'm at ease with the missing, where I am totally not. Okay, let's see what else did the Buddha say here. He said, when one has abandoned these, talking about the refining of the mind states, when you've abandoned clinging to relatives, to nation, or to one's reputation, there may still remain grasping to special states of meditation. Right? Kind of like, well, I'm not so attached anymore. My integrity is pretty impeccable, but now I want to dissolve into the bliss rainbow body. And I'm fucking pissed that it's not happening. Because on the last retreat, I got there, and then on this retreat, and that sort of suffering of trying to recreate and clinging to meditative absorptions or spiritual experiences. And the spiritual practitioner can create a lot of suffering in their lives of trying to get back to that one time in 1976 when everything was good. Before most of you were born. Thus, concentration is not yet properly calm and refined. It has not attained to full tranquility, nor has it achieved mental unification. But there comes a time when the practitioner mind gains firmness within. It settles down. It becomes unified and concentrated. And with such concentration, the practitioner is able to direct the mind to the states of higher insight, which is seeing clearly the impermanent, impersonal, and unsatisfactory nature of all things. Having completed this initial purification, a follower of the way devoted to practice should from time to time direct attention to the three qualities of mind that I just mentioned. And the practitioner should from time to time pay attention to the states of concentration, the states of energetic effort, and the states of equanimity. So it goes on and on. He goes back into the goldsmith. I love the fact that the Buddha often would teach in these analogies. He knew a lot about goldsmithing. Pretty sure that the Buddha was a Jew. Is that racist? I can say that because I'm a Jew, right? Maybe not, I don't know. He goes back, he says, suppose a goldsmith builds a furnace, lights a fire in its opening, takes the gold with a pair of tongs and puts it into the furnace. From time to time, the goldsmith blows on it. From time to time, the goldsmith sprinkles water on it. From time to time, the goldsmith examines it closely. If the goldsmith were to blow on the gold continuously, it might be heated too much. And so this is about effort. If the goldsmith continually sprinkled water on it, it would be too cooled. If the goldsmith were only to examine it closely, the gold would not to come to the perfect refinement. But if from time to time the goldsmith attends to each of these three functions, the gold will become pliant, workable, bright, and it can easily be molded. Giving this more holistic view of how to relate to our minds, of how to relate to the Eightfold Path, that it's not just meditation, it's not just ethical behavior. We're not only looking for impermanence or suffering, that there's this holistic thing we're looking for. Am I balanced? Am I putting enough effort in? Am I renouncing what needs to be renounced? Do I have ethical integrity? Are my thoughts lustful, cruel, and filled with ill will? Or are they generous, not attached, but based on kindness, based on generosity? Am I training my mind? Am I beginning to think intentional thoughts of loving kindness, of non-ill will, of compassion, of non-cruelty? Get the picture? May any goodness that comes from our practice be shared in all directions with all living beings.